Everyone, this is Kyle from Series. Today we're having another in-depth training call, and today we'll be talking about modifiers and how they can be used on products to either change the price, change the parts, or even use them on your product layouts to show some extra information that you normally couldn't show. The call is being recorded, so if you happen to miss anything, please take a look at our wiki site, and the call will be uploaded, and if you have any questions, you'll be able to review the movie and look at them there. So basically what modifiers are is it's a way to get extra information that isn't normally handled by the typical pricing forms. So if you have an extra part or an extra question that you want to try to account for on your particular products, but none of the existing fields work for you, modifiers are a good way to go ahead and add in those extra questions, add in that extra information that you'd want to track on that particular product. Things like rush charges or extra labor, extra parts that go into it, and even sometimes just having pure information purposes that don't have any effect on the pricing are all some examples of what modifiers can do for you. So what we can do is that if I go up and start under Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup. On the far left, there is a section under Supporting Components that says Modifier Setup. And when I take that, that takes me to the screen where we can go through and set up the different modifiers that the system will use. Right now, the first thing that you're seeing is the different modifier categories. The categories don't really have any bearing on the modifier whatsoever. It just makes it easier to sort your modifiers, make them easier to group them and find them if you're coming back to this screen to make any changes. So so you can add in new categories, new subcategories to group the modifiers up easier, but it really won't affect your modifiers in any way, shape, or form. So if we take a look under General, we'll see that we have a couple of example modifiers already. We have additional charges, additional material, design fees, rush, and a couple of extra options on there. What we're going to do here is we'll kind of take and mimic one of these modifiers to kind of make our own to show you how to make the modifier, how it works, how the different pricing, how the different parts work on some of the modifiers, and then also how we can take that information and print that out on either the estimate invoice or the work order if there's extra information that you want people to see. So let's start off by doing a rush charge modifier, because those are usually pretty simple. So when you get the category that you want to put your modifier under, you select that main category, and you click on New Modifier. So that will open up the new modifier screen. So the first question it's going to ask you is modifier code. So similar to how you have a product code, you have a modifier code. So that is, the modifier code is what the system will use to reference this modifier. We call this rush charge, and then print as is the same exact thing there as well. Typically your modifier code and your print as will be the same information. The next question is the question label. The question/label is actually what the modifier will show up on the screen when you're actually going to enter in information for the modifier. So this is the question that you want people that are entering the job to be able to see, and this is what it will ask it. So I'll say my question here, will there be a rush? So that's what it will show up on the screen. The next option is sort level. Sort level can be used to group up the modifiers in a specific order. So I can go through, if I have multiple modifiers, I can go through all the modifiers and change the sort level to be the order that I want them to be in. So I can put this one as a sort level of 1. I can go to the old rush and set it to be a sort level of 2, and that would put it under this particular modifier. So it's a way that you can use to sort the modifiers in the modifier grid so that they are in the order that you want them to appear in. The next section is the default entry options. This is where you tell the system what type of modifier it is that you're going to create. And there are 3 types of modifiers that we can make. We can make just a simple checkbox modifier. We can make it a numeric spinner, which is a modifier that lets you pick a number. Or we can make it a drop-down list that is either something that you can just type text into, or you could link it to a list that's in the system. For a rush charge, since we're asking a yes or no question of will there be a rush charge, we're just going to go ahead and leave it as a checkbox modifier. So the next question is going to be pricing. This mimics the pricing tab of the product. So I can tell it that I'm going to either use standard cost plus pricing, I'm going to use a suggested price from parts, or I'm going to use this formula. Since we're not really tying any parts to this rush, I need to go and make it use this formula. So the way the rush charge works is I can either make it a flat number, I could just type in something like 15 to make it a flat number for that particular rush. Or I could even go and make it a formula to be a percentage of the price. So I could do pre-discount price times 15% to make the price of this modifier be 15% of the pre-discount price. When you're referencing the price to use for this formula, you always want to reference the pre-discount price. So in this case here, I'll go ahead and make this modifier a 15% increase of the price of my job. The next tab is the products. What products are that I need to use this modifier? So how many products do I want to have access to this rush charge modifier? So all I have to do is go to Add, and then just go through the different products that I want to have this modifier be an option for. So I'll go ahead and say Design, and then Rigid and Roll. And for now, we'll leave it there. So I click on OK. So it adds those products there. I can have this be a default value, so if I wanted to automatically check it as being checked, I could actually go and set the value here to be 1 as my default value. With a checkbox, you really don't need to mess with saying an answer required, because the answer is going to be either yes or no. But you can, for some of the other modifiers, require a value to be put in on that particular modifier. The last tab is parts. For the rush charge, we don't need to do any parts, but I'll go ahead and do another modifier here in a moment where I'll show you how you can reference a particular part and tell it how to use that part on the screen here. So for now, we're going to go ahead and save this modifier. So now I have a new modifier in my list called rush charge. Let's go ahead and make one more modifier, and then we'll pull up the job and look and see what these modifiers actually look like. So I'm going to go ahead and say General, New Modifier, and now I'm going to make a new modifier. Let's go ahead and make this one a reference to extra printing labor. So I'm going to go ahead and call the modifier print labor. My question is going to be extra print labor. And this time, since I want to be able to specify how much extra labor there is, I want to go ahead and say this is a numeric spinner. The pricing on this I want to leave as a suggested price from parts, since we're going to link this to a particular part. My products, I'm going to link this to the same products as last time. So I'll say Design, Digital Prints, Roll, and Rigid. Okay, so the main difference this time is instead of going through and setting up a specific pricing for this modifier, I'm going to link this to a specific part. So I'm going to go to Parts, I'm going to Add, and similar to how we added a product, when I do Add here, I get a listing of all the parts in the system. So now I can drill down to labor, standard labor, And I'm going to scroll down to my print labor. So I'll add that on there. And then I get a screen that looks very similar to the Part tab on a particular product. So the questions that I have now are include this part when, either always or when this expression is true. And then consume this part means how much of this, how much print labor do I want to consume. When you're working with modifiers, you get a special variable that you can work with that references the value that you enter in on this particular modifier. So I'm going to change my quantity consumed here from quantity to QTY applied. That is the special name of the variable that references the value of this modifier. So that way, every modifier has its own reference to quantity applied, which means that every time I do a modifier, it references its own selection every time I use that particular value. So I'm going to go and say, include this part when, and I'm going to say, I only want to include this if QTY applied is greater than 0. So I only want to include this part if I put a value that's more than 0 on this particular part. So now I go ahead and save this modifier here. And I'm going to say a new order. And we'll use design because that one should be pretty simple to see how these changes affect this product. So I'll add a design product and get a standard price in here. Okay, so now that I have a price here, most products contain a list on the right side for user add-ons. Sometimes it'll be a tab that you have to select called add-ons. Other times it'll be showing by default. But in almost all circumstances, it'll be a grid on the right side listed as add-ons. So on here, you can see that there's the modifiers that already existed for next day rush and additional materials. And then there's the modifiers that we created, will there be a rush, and extra print labor. So if I check the box for will there be a rush, it goes to $6.75 because we made the price formula on that particular modifier be pre-discount price times 15%. If I uncheck the box, it'll go back to $0, back to my normal price. So if I check the box there, it goes back up. I have the ability to tell it the price that I want this modifier to be. So in this particular, let's say this is a special case, and I want to charge more for this particular rush, I can just select the $6.75 and type in 10. And that will note that the modifier value is overridden and increase the price of that particular job. I can uncheck the OVR button to send it back to the default value, and it's back to calculating the way it was before. So next is the extra print labor. So this is a normal spin edit. So if I go up 1, my price goes up to $131 because if I go take a look at my parts here at the bottom, it's adding the part print labor based off of the value that we set in for that particular modifier. So now there's 1 hour of print labor. If I go back to the pricing form, I can go and set this to be, let's say, 1.5. My price will go up to $174. If I go back to the parts, I'm now using 1.5 hours of print labor. So it's going to use the amount of the part that I tell it to for that particular type of part that I added to that modifier. So if I click on OK, that's something else. If I click on OK, it's showing me then that my price on this particular item is now $174 because I'm accounting for the labor from the extra printing. Now, if a price is tied specifically to the modifier, like it is within the case of the rush, I'm going to go back into that design, check the rush again, so 2610. If I click OK, back on the screen here, it's going to note how much of that price actually comes specifically from modifiers and not from the base price of the job, including the parts. So in this case here, it's stating that I have $26.10 specifically from the modifiers that are on that particular job. So using modifiers, I can use that to ask extra questions. I can use that to show any other information that is not normally stated on the job. Now maybe I want to print that information to the customer or to my production people back in the back on the work order. So I need to be able to use these modifiers on what we call the product layouts. So what I'm going to do to start off with this is I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go to Line Item Options, View Product. From here, it takes me to the product setup for this product. I'm going to click on the Pricing Forms / Product Layout button. If you don't see this tab, you may have to click on the Advanced tab and then make sure the checkbox next to Pricing Forms Product Layouts is checked. So go back to that tab, and I have specified here the product layout used for invoice and estimate and product layout used for work order. So I can make this change to either one or both depending on who I want to see this modifier change. For the example here, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the invoice estimate. So I'm going to open up the Edit Product Layout here and resize the screen a little bit so that we can see a little bit better. So this is the layout that gets used on the estimate and invoice for the design product. So what I want to do here is I want to be able to tell the customer that they're getting X number of hours of that extra print labor. So I'm going to edit the layout. I'm going to add a new line here at the bottom. And the way that you will reference modifiers is two different ways. I can say either modifier value and then put the modifier name in quotes. I want to be able to account for if that modifier is not found, so I can put a comma 0 as a catch-all to say if that modifier doesn't exist or if that modifier isn't on this product, a way to kind of protect myself and make sure that the formula is correct. So I'll close that, and that will reference any number value that is on the modifier. So if it has a number or if it has a true-false value, that'll return a numerical value there. If I'm using a text-based UDF or I want to use it on a text along with text, what I can do is say display modifier value to display the actual value as a text string. So what we're going to add here is I'm going to say if modifier value does not equal 0, then I'm going to print an extra line that says extra print labor, close, add in my line for display modifier value. Otherwise, don't print anything. End it. So if I save this, I go back to my new order. You can see how it adds the extra line there that notes extra print labor 1.5. So I can go back to my layout. I can add in extra words. I can add in the word hour. I can make it a bullet item. But essentially, I can reference those modifiers to be able to print on the layouts for either the customer or for the production people on the work order. And that way, I can use modifiers to display any type of extra information that I may want, that I may need anybody to know that maybe not necessarily affect the price, I can handle through a modifier if it's not handled anywhere else on that particular product. And that is essentially how you can use modifiers throughout the system to either affect the price, to add in new parts, or to be able to show that information to your customers and to your production people on your different reports through the use of modifiers on layouts.